Okay, hello. Having survived the solstice, I think we all managed it. Well, not all of us, but um, there's a whole lot of people around me who are really excited about what the solstice was bringing this year. Because not only is it the solstice, the winter solstice for 2020, but there's all this business about the great conjunction of Jupiter and Saturn converging. Um, so, like a bit of amusement hovering in me for that. Okay, so um, yeah, I was just having a chat with somebody, exploring this question from a lived practical perspective of, well, how do you tell what's true? Like this is, it's very easy in a lot of Western contexts to have this sense of, oh, well, you tell what's true by doing this kind of examination and yada yada. But I don't mean this as the intellectual, like the mental masturbation philosophy thing. Actually, I may actually just get rid of that phrase because it treats masturbation like it's something pointless. And it's actually one of the most powerful internal power cultivation tools any of us have. So I may get rid of that. Um, but there's something kind of a bit spinny in the head about asking questions like this. So what I'm talking about is a very practical thing. This is not about abstract philosophy about what is truth and how do we determine it. Um, I'm looking at a kind of challenge that um, it has to do with this business of when we know something to be true, how do we listen to that? And when we don't know what's true, what's going on there? So I'll shift gears over to my own personal experience and emphasize that to highlight what I'm talking about. There's So a couple of days ago, I had this kind of friction I brought up in several of these last live streams, where I've explored, like I bumped into a challenge with my partner, with my girlfriend, um, and the details. Like I don't want to dig into the details too much. We resolved it beautifully, um, but there was a kind of challenge of um, where I was trying to be polite. I was trying to be considerate, particularly of the space that she was in, trying to wrestle with her own feelings about a challenging internal transformation that she's been going through, and um, uh, she'd made some choices that I found very triggering. I found them very upsetting. And I was trying to focus on, look, she doesn't need this right now. I can process on my own. But there was something in me that knew that what I was doing by pushing down my feelings was not okay. It just not okay. This wasn't just a feeling of I have these strong emotions and I can't stand it. That's the triggeredness. But there's something separate from the triggeredness, which is the knowing. I knew on some level, on a very deep level, in my guts and my balls and my bones, this is not kind. Kind to whom? That starts to get a little fuzzy, but the predominant one in that case is to myself, but in a way that interacts with her. But I didn't have mental access to it because my mind was busy spinning with all of this logic. All of this, oh, well, she's going through all this difficulty and what she's doing here is very reasonable for her growth. And she didn't mean anything that was mean to me. And I don't expect the bad thing I can feel myself being triggered by. So there's like my thoughts doing this spinning and trying to manage. It's actually something, it's like the mental version of the emotional post-production in some sense, what I talked about, God, a week ago. Um, so there was that spinning, trying to manage the triggery reaction, trying to suppress that. That actually just is the emotional post-production, trying to keep the overwhelm from coming forward and affecting her. Yeah, I think that just is the thing I was talking about, this screen that I was trying to put in front, trying to manage what was going on. because my mind was busy with all of that, with trying to manage how she was receiving me and trying to navigate my own energies, my mind was unavailable to translate my inner knowing into a conscious thought. But there was still a knowing. And that knowing is very closely related to why I was triggered in the first place. Okay. So I want to focus on how I find tracking. Hey, Elo. I find that tracking what this inner knowing, like how to track it, how to experience it, how to orient to it, and how to build trust in it. It's kind of funny to talk about it as building trust because it's the only thing I have ever trusted in my whole life. Then there's but I don't fully trust it by default. And a lot of my own development has been a matter of coming to listen to it more and to trust it more fully, to orient the whole of my mental and emotional system to respect that. So this is the same place from which, like, when I'm getting a feeling from someone, when I'm having a conversation with somebody, like I've gotten a lot of people who have been pinging me privately, like asking to chat with me or to set up a call or just to see how we're doing, and I get an emotional sense and an energetic sense from each of them, what their intent is, and I'm not trying to claim something woo telepathic about this. I mean, this is how I experience each point of contact. There's a feeling of, well, what's the energy behind their intent? I'm imagining it, like to the best of my ability, I'm just imagining it. But there's a level where I can tell. Right? I know what's coming. I might not have all the details, but there's a kind of knowing. Is this person there as emphatic support? Is this person feeling inadequate and looking for an opportunity to interact with somebody who's being public and is saying things that they want to interact with, sort of to bask in it? Are they trying to argue with me? I've had quite a few people, although vanishingly fewer. This has been wonderful to watch this drop off. It used to be so much more years ago, and this has become almost nil. I've had a pretty significant number of people before who would reach out to me, wanting to do a lot of mental fencing to really work out the ideas, and would want to challenge each of the details and sort of sort it out and go, well, is this logically correct? And there's this, I've learned to feel a kind of fatigue in my core as soon as I get that flavor of like, okay, yeah, I don't want this. Yeah, I think I'm done with this. Fine with collaboration and not so much with arguing or with trying to fix people. So now that doesn't mean that that intuition is correct. It's a description of the way that it feels in my body when I receive a message and I interpret where that message is coming from. It's sort of an extended sense. My mind is playing a role there. I do know whether I'm a yes to interacting. That's not vague. Does my body relax or does it tense? Okay. This is, I want to emphasize when I'm talking about this is not a domain of expertise for me. I don't feel like I've mastered this, and it's not really, like, it's getting more and more into my blood and bones, but it's a challenge for me. By default, I rely so much more on my intellect, so much more. And that's so the habit. My energy keeps going up to my head. But that's not where truth is. That's become incredibly obvious to me, incredibly obvious. So what I can know is, when I'm paying attention to it, does my body open and have this kind of yum, or is it, okay? and I can track what the cause is. Okay? This is not an analytic thing. This is not in the head. My mind can help, but the actual process is something more like, if I look at the message, does my body contract? Okay? Or when I look at the message, and then I think things about it, does my body contract? Excuse me. When I land on an orientation to the message that I am a yes for, when I recognize, I'm going to set this aside, or I'm going to engage with this, there's an opening. Now, I was just having a chat with someone about this, about, well, how is this different from just doing what feels good? This is a detail that had bugged me for a long time. It's sort of like well, can't we just use pleasure as the guiding principle? But what about all these spiritual communities who keep having the follow your bliss thing, and they're all very happy people, but they're also really poor and they have no end of complaints. Right? There's something weird going on here about, like, well, how do you actually follow your bliss, or what's the real thing? What I would now point out there, like what I find really clarifying, this is a big piece I actually got from Perry Chase, of just emphasizing, well, what's true? Which, now, frankly, if you'd given me that instruction a year ago, I would have glared at you and gone, well, how do I tell? Like I could give you all kinds of analysis. But the actual answer is, if I feel into my gut, if I feel into my belly, and I track the thing that tells me when I know anything at all, I know that those worries about, well, how do I tell what's true? It's just noise. It doesn't mean the thoughts are useless, but it means they're disconnected from what matters. So what matters? And that's always a contextual question. It's always going to depend on where I am in a given moment. But let me rewind a little bit and go to this bit about, well, isn't this just do what feels good? Just follow your pleasure? Importantly, no. My experience is that this often results in pleasure and ease and expansion. But sometimes what I can feel I'm a yes to is really scary. It's really thrilling, and there's something of like, am I going to be overwhelmed? So sometimes I can feel into, oh, I am a yes for responding to this message. And this is going to welcome a whole lot more interaction, and I'm going to have to relax more and open my heart more in order to stay true to where I want to come from in this interaction. And part of me just wants to crawl into a hole and just go, this doesn't feel good to me, and I'm kind of overwhelmed, and I think I'm just going to go read a book, and I have to care for my energy, and this is about caring for me and my energy, right? Well, that's the rationale. I often find that when I am listening to what I know is true, I am invited to things that are really hard. So a recent example for me, a very concrete example, was I had, God, I guess it was about a month ago now, I had written an article for an online community that was, hey, I've been listening to all of this astrological stuff for quite a while, and I think I finally understand what the system sort of should be in order to understand, at least for anybody whose mind works at all like mine. So here is the intro to astrology I would have wanted when going into this community, just so I could understand the language and be able to use this, like if like wanting to navigate this whole topic, like that. This seems like the kind of intro that I would really want. Okay. Now, even now, I notice heat in talking about this. Thinking of myself as working with astrology or writing an astrology article is extremely alien to my sense of identity. This is not my previous decade had been in the context of a community that used astrology as one of the standard set of things, along with things like homeopathy and energy healing and stuff like that, as examples of things people look into when their ability to tell what's true is broken. And you only meander into those kinds of topics if you're asking to have your mind poisoned and to become incapable of tracking reality. Right? And like my father would sometimes go on rants about how like frustrating astrology is, and how, well, if there is any reality to it, how would we know? Well, I mean, it sure seems like these people are making stuff up to make sure it fits whatever they need. So, and I'm not without a lot of those opinions myself. I think there's a huge amount in astrology that is complete, utter bullshit. I also think that there is an important dimension on which that doesn't matter. That relates to the stuff I was talking about yesterday about meaning making and the desperate need for meaning that Western culture has. But when you claim you have a tool that can tell the future, there's a question of, well, does it work? And the astrological communities are pretty consistently sketchy about that question. So, so for me, there's a lot of embarrassment that shows up in talking about that and in bringing it up. And I'm trying to work through that because there's something about, like, I don't entirely know why, but there is something very expansive and important about sorting it out. Now, I didn't know this when I first jumped into the topic, but this turns out to be one of the foundational cornerstones of almost all of Western thought and Western meaning making. And our alienation of understanding it has given us no opportunity to sort of revamp it and sort of dust it off and orient to it in a more useful way. So, but none of this came from an intellectual place of, I'm now going to examine all of this stuff and then clean it up and show everybody else how it works. Like that, it had nothing to do with that. For me, it was just, I noticed that my mind is hungry for understanding this system, and more importantly than that, the energy from which it's coming has a sense of, this is important. I don't know why. Likewise, when it came time for me to write that article, I didn't know why. There's just this sense of, I've got to write this. This happens to me often. I'll just suddenly, in some sort of essay, will possess me and it will be written. I gave an analogy a couple of times to, although I don't know if I ever did it on these live streams, of it feeling sort of like I've been pregnant with something and then suddenly the water broke. And now I'm going to give birth. That's what's going to happen. So, but I didn't know why. I just knew that that's true. There is no question. I had lots of concerns and thoughts about it and kind of wanting to hide around it and then sort of go, well, but like, shame is not a useful way to organize my psychic system, and oh, maybe this is to go through shame. But all those thoughts were irrelevant. I already knew it was true. I already knew I was going to write the article. So there's no point in adding the extra mental noise. I already knew. That was true. And I did. And this produced a rather stunning amount of interest in people wanting me to read their astrological charts. So this has produced some really powerful conversations that have been very meaningful and useful for a whole lot of people. Now, like, is this stuff? There's this question of, is it lexically true? Yeah, this is a bit of philosophy that. This is the part where I notice a jamming in myself, where this is actually quite challenging for me. I feel clear in myself about what all of this means, but there's a part of me that really wants to worry about what other people think of me and wants to manage perceptions. One of the arguments that leaps up about this from my imagined audience is this, not all of them, just like any of them that I would have known in the Bay Area. Almost any. um, there's this concern of, yeah, but astrology makes these claims. Are the claims true? And is this tracking your magic gut thing, is feeling into what's going on in the belly and in the chest and tracking expansiveness or contractedness? Is like, that's like, I bet that wouldn't have, like, that's not going to give you psychic access to the result of experiments. That's the whole reason for doing science. So I think there's something importantly true about that. So I'm wanting to acknowledge that. I'm not anti-science here, despite what some might think based on some of my rants. No, I love that art. It's a beautiful expression of our humanity, some of the higher aspects of our humanity. But I have a whole array of things I could say there. But I think the thing that I actually want to say, the thing that actually wants to come through me on this is, what is the thing that drives that fear? What drives the concern? I'm obviously saying something. When I'm talking about truth, and I'm talking about, is it true? Is it real? Does it matter? You already know. It's the same knowing that tells you that when you are arguing with someone, like, let me be a little clearer. I'm going to use Death's scythe here to cut through some stuff. When I am interacting with somebody, or I'm interacting with someone I care about, and like talking to my girlfriend or talking to a friend or a family member, and if I'm getting into a bit of a tense interaction with them, something happens on the emotional level, on a very body level, that is clarifying. If I remember the fact that it is quite possible that this is the last conversation I will ever have with them. Not because the tension is so high stakes necessarily, but they could get hit by a car. They could have a brain aneurysm. They could have, there's just a ton of stuff that could happen. That could have them just be gone. And when I do that, when that thought occurs to me, there's something that cuts through and becomes very clear. Is this really what I want to be doing with them? Now, that doesn't mean that treating every interaction with every person as though it's the last one makes logical sense. It's not good game theory. But there's something true about cutting through the bullshit and recognizing, you know what, this argument doesn't actually matter. Like, I can come up with arguments for why there is a benefit for me to chew through the logic of this, but that's not the point. The point is that my heart knows that there is actually, there's a truth here, a heart truth about what this connection is for. And so the thing is that what that blade does, what the scythe of death does, is that it brings in perspective to make it easier for me to recognize a truth that I knew the whole time, but I was ignoring. The truth that this argument doesn't matter. The point isn't to get into them with this about it. The point is that I want to be connected. I want to be open. I want the sense of closeness. Maybe, like that might not be true in every case, but when it is, that's what matters. And then all of this arguing is like a display of habits and the way that my tensions and contractions interact with theirs. And a part of me already knows. And part of how I can tell that I'm doing the thing that doesn't make sense on the heart level is that I'm contracting. Like, there's a body level thing, there's an emotional thing, there's this feeling like armor, there's this... but I just want to care about you. Yeah. Like, okay. But that means that I'm listening to the parts of me that are coming more from fear and from a story that I know isn't true. By which I mean isn't real. It doesn't matter. It might be logically correct based on the information I have, but that doesn't matter. So, when I look at these things of, well, but can this magic knowing tell you about science, blah, 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 blah. First off, I'd look at that and say, it sounds like you just want to fight with me. Have fun with that. When you're ready to listen to the part of you that actually wants to guide you towards something clear and true, that's your choice. I'm sharing with you what is absolutely obvious to me now. Okay. But one way to get there is to recognize, like if you want to open up, one way to do that is to recognize that I'm talking about something. I'm talking about something real. It might be real for me, but I'm talking about something real. So if the only angle you have to approach it is to try to disagree with it, it's worth asking yourself, what in you needs to disagree? I'm not saying you should just believe me. I'm trying to point inside you and go, well, what in you does the knowing? How do you know you disagree? What tells you that you aren't sure about me? It's not your thoughts. Your thoughts come after. Your thoughts try to articulate something. Like I imagine from having watched a lot of people, and I'm kind of projecting here, but I'm pretty sure this is how it works for humans. There's this mechanism of energy moves, and then like steam hitting a steam engine, thoughts spin, and the thoughts, one of the ideal jobs of the mind is to articulate what's going on in more basic systems. But oftentimes that gets co-opted for something else. And that something else is often to maintain a particular story. A bunch of this relates to some fascinating stuff with evolutionary memetics. But at the base, whatever the thoughts spin and whatever logic they say and whatever stories they insist are true and are important, and but how do you know this? And here's what you can do. And but how do I deal with this? Well, what's fueling those thoughts? You can just see if you choose to look. Okay. So I'm actually not going to argue about the science part. Okay. I'm going to let you stew in that if that's one of your edges. See, there's some comments here. Hey, Daniel. Daniel says, does this gut sense sometimes confirm assessments of truth that the mind makes? Yeah. Yeah. Typically, my experience is that the mind approximately can't land on relevant truths if the body's sense of it hasn't been able to land on it. The mind can do something like algebra, but if the and by that what I mean is there's a thing that I notice my mind can do when I have done a really good job of articulating true things. Not just, here are some facts I know and I've verified them and here's my verification process and that means I can trust it. That's all in the head. What I mean is when I pause and I notice people matter more than ideas. And there's a thing that I mean by that. There's a very specific thing, and I've worked on articulating these pieces, and having these pieces available to me now means I have an articulated thought with a handle. People matter more than ideas. Closely related to love matters more than ideas. That's in part an instruction to myself, that getting into arguments with people is less useful across any of the things that I care about than is anchoring myself in what I know to be true and opening and inviting real connection where I want it, where I am a yes to it. And there's this additional skill that I'm still very much learning, like this skill of loving. Still working on that. I think I'll be working on that my whole life. But having that thought, people matter more than ideas. Now I have this thought and it can interact with other things like, well, but what about economics and how do we deal with the economic structures? And I have these thoughts about economics that my gut doesn't have a whole lot of opinion about. And now there's a way for me to plug in what's going on with the people matter more than ideas into how economics works. And then a whole bunch of crazy stuff about economics becomes clear. That's doing something like mental computation, taking something I can tell is true, and then look at the economic system and notice how that truth interacts with the system. That's absolutely something the mind can do, which means I can sort of use the mind to compute conclusions and extensions of something that my body has landed on and gone, this. And in that sense, I can sometimes get thoughts that my body can go, oh yes, that's true. But I think it's closely related to the same thing that mathematicians do when they're feeling out possibilities for how to prove something, and then something clicks and they go, that's it. That's the pathway. And they haven't even done the algebra yet. They haven't done the verification, but they know. And the rest just actually feels like cleaning up details. And occasionally they can like run into a snag and realize, oh, there's actually some important detail here that requires a lot of work, and maybe I was mistaken about something about the initial intuition here. But for the most part, there is a kind of knowing this direction has promise. And more importantly and interestingly, a lot of mathematicians get this intuition of this is an interesting problem. Interesting meaning it produces good work, but how can you know until you've done it? Well, they know. It's a trained intuition, but they just kind of know. Cool. So, slightly long-winded answer saying yes, yes, very much so. Hey, Sophia. You say, God, I think about that line of thought constantly. This could be the last conversation I ever have with them. But it produces such a massive amount of neurosis and anxiety in me that I'm not sure it's helpful to me. Yeah, what I would say with that is, then if that's producing too much anxiety for you to access the clarity, then you know that. That's true of where you are right now. So find a different tool. The point of that thought experiment is not to drill the truth of it because, well, this is a factual thing. That could be true. Well, there are lots of other factual things. Did you know that according to quantum physics, a puppy could appear over my head and drop on it? Like, it's very improbable, but it's actually possible in quantum physics. Right? So I better integrate that truth. Or what if it's an anvil? Or what if it's a dagger? Or what if it's $1 million? Like, like there are lots of things that are true, technically, but they don't matter. So the goal, from what I can tell, is you're not trying to integrate all things that could be true or all things that are true. Relevance matters. That's what relevance is. So the question is there a tool or a set of tools you can sort of lean into that give you access to the stillness? Or at least for me, I experience it as stillness. And I use that thought experiment of this could be my last conversation with the person because it actually creates a glimmer of grief and sorrow. And that slows me down. And it gives me perspective. That's the point, as far as I'm concerned. And obviously, if something like, as I've been hinting at, if it creates contraction for you, then that's probably not terribly useful, is my opinion. Elo, replying to Sophia, says, I have experience with this. If you ever want someone to work this, okay, that sounds like a conversation between you two. Okay, cool. Yeah, so the really basic baseline for this, like the thing that I want to point at here is that there's a place from which you know. Like I've been trying in this whole series to be really careful to own my experience, to say, look, this is what my impression is, this is where I'm coming from. This is one I'm willing to say, this is true. This is true of everyone. Everyone has this sense. Part of the reason I know that is that anybody who doesn't have this sense can't actually create a mind. There's nothing to build the mind on. How do you know you're watching this video? Okay? We can do some weird philosophy stuff of, well, maybe I'm not watching the video. This could be a dream. Maybe it's not the video. Yeah, but that's playing with word games. You know you're watching it. Okay? The mind can play word games. The mind can play frame games and start to doubt whether you're experiencing this, whether you're experiencing watching this video. But you know. So how do you know? Okay? Don't make the mistake of asking your mind that question. Then you'll be answering a different question. The question you'll be answering is, what thoughts does my mind produce when I ask it how I know? You might consider thinking of your mind like a computer. In fact, computers are modeled after, as far as I can tell, the left hemisphere, which when I'm talking about mind, I don't know, like 80% of the time or so, that's what I'm talking about. I'm talking about the left hemisphere. Because when we actually pay attention to, well, who am I? The experience of it seems to come predominantly from the right hemisphere, ish. Okay. But there is a thing in us that tells us, oh, but I know. I know I'm watching this. I know I'm here right now. Okay? So that's the sense that I'm pointing at. Now, I think for most people, this knowing echoes in the body. That the body sort of acts like a thermometer, a truth thermometer. In this case, the word truth is playing a slightly different role than it does for the left hemisphere. The left hemisphere has this completely bonkers model of truth based on correspondence. Does this idea match reality? No. I don't care what idea it is. No. No idea matches reality. That's why they're ideas instead of reality. That's the point. But I've given that rant a few times. But from what I can tell for most people, definitely true of me, and this is just such a common instruction that rings with so many people that I'm inclined to say, you know, I think this might be true of everybody, and that the people for whom this doesn't resonate are because they're sort of trying to get out of their bodies and they're trying to sort everything out with their minds. But the mind can't do it. The mind can never do it on its own because the mind's foundation is in the body. Try removing the head and trying to think. It's very hard. So just tracking, does this create opening the way that relaxing in a hot bath creates opening? The way that somebody looking at you and saying, oh, okay, somebody that you trust and you can feel it, having the sense of being heard, being felt, being understood, going, oh, okay, well that matters. Like to have actual concern, but not looking down. Like there's ways to make it contracty. But there's an opening. That opening is the body's fight or flight system calming down, the sort of more rest and digest, open up parasympathetic nervous system becoming more dominant. The reason it happens is the body doesn't feel threatened. The body tenses up, becomes contracted, becomes protective. It activates its fight or flight system when it perceives a threat. And as far as I can tell, the dominant source of threat is being out of touch with reality. So when the body knows something that the mind hasn't caught onto, and the mind is doubling down on a hallucination, you're going to have anxiety. If you use that anxiety to try to figure out what's true and figure out what you should do and why I'm a bad person and how to solve this situation, and you keep getting more anxious, guess what's going on? The body's saying, no, please stop. I'm fucking terrified. Hey, is anyone listening up there? Oh, fuck. the head's off on La La Land, like this. So you can just listen to that, just the raw sensation. Is there, there can be activation. There can be activation and a lot of alertness that is open. Okay. I see that there's a few things. How does this differ from gaslighting? Sophia asks. By being the opposite of gaslighting. I'm not telling you what's true. I mean, I may have said some things of like, this is true, but what I'm trying to put forward is not this is what you should believe. I am stating facts about my perception and my existence. And I'm inviting you to do the same with yourself. To look around and to notice you kind of know some places where you're bullshitting yourself. We all do. Right? It's hard to consciously access because that's what bullshit is. We do a mental search. What are things I'm bullshitting myself about? Although sometimes if you actually do a sincere search, if you pause and you go, what's something I pretend is true but I know isn't? There will be stuff for many people, not everybody. Like there's a difference in mind types for this, mental architectures, I sometimes say, where some people just can't do this search, but some definitely can. Have you tried doing that sincerely, going, where am I telling myself something that I know is false? Typically what comes to mind is something that a part of you really doesn't want you to look at in that lens. Okay? And you'll feel contraction when you look at that thought. But the thing is that this is not about saying here is a framework that you need to believe in, and if you don't believe in it, well, that's because there's something wrong with you. Oh no, this never happened to you. You're mistaken about that. Like that's gaslighting. That's undermining somebody's inner knowing. I'm encouraging the opposite. I'm saying everything you do is built on your inner knowing. It's just that some of the things that we've built actively distract us from it. Which ones? Well, I don't know. I can point them out, but it's less exciting for me to point it out than it is for you to notice for yourself using your inner knowing. Right? So to me, that is absolutely the opposite of gaslighting. This is this is gaslighting immunity. I claim that getting this causes one to become incapable of being gaslit. Because why? When somebody says, well, you think that you know some things, but it turns out actually what's going on is that the brain creates these kinds of illusions because it's trying to do this survival stuff, so you can't actually trust your own thinking. There's all kinds of evolutionary psychology stuff along those lines. That's gaslighting. You can't trust your inner knowing because, well, what's running your inner knowing? How can you trust it? Huh? Well, like we need a justification. How do you know you need a justification? And well, because if you don't have justification, then you can't trust it. Great, how do you know that? What tells you that logic even works? What tells you that a justification makes any sense? Oh, because when I think through it, I can see how it works. Which you know. How? You can't get away from this. You can't ever get away from this. You're using it all the time. Once you see that, once it becomes integrated into your being, you can't be confused anymore. Not confused by other people about what's true. It doesn't work. I see. And you're saying when I say that, I'm referring to the asking of, but how do you know that? Okay, so you're asking about specifically the way. Okay, so you're trying to understand something about that foundational piece. This thing of, okay, what I'm trying to do there is invite. So when I'm saying something like, so we'll look at I think syllogisms are a stupid way of doing this. they're actually beautiful. There's actually something beautiful and powerful, but it's the beauty and power of mathematics that our culture has thoroughly alienated and traumatized almost everybody about. Basically, no one is taught math anymore. People are only taught computation. Some people learn mathematics anyway, but they rarely learn the spiritual depths of the discipline that caused it to be what it is. The linguistic root for the word mathematics is actually the same as the root science. Science is the Latin version of the Greek word mathematics. And this has deep roots all the way back into Jnana Yoga. It's a very profound arc there. There's actually a deep spiritual isness there. But when I look at something like, how do you know that you are watching this video? Okay. There are mental games that questions like that, I often see them used for a gaslighting type move, which is, well, how do you know you're watching this video? Like, maybe you're just dreaming, maybe you're imagining things, maybe you're, maybe it's all in your head. I mean, you know it's all in your head. What if you're mistaken in your perception? And what if you're actually schizophrenic? Schizophrenics hallucinate all the time, right? And they're very certain about their experiences, but if you were schizophrenic, you would resist the idea. And look at you resisting. That's evidence that you're schizophrenic. It's like, that's gaslighting. Okay, that's bullshit. Right? Because as much sense as each of those thoughts internally make, and as much as the argument kind of works, its purpose is to unplug you from reality so that you get lost in thought and then question your own senses. Okay. When I'm asking this question, how do you know you are watching this video? I'm not challenging whether you know. I'm inviting you to look at how you know. That knowing comes before thought. You build your thoughts on that knowing. So I'm pointing you there to invite you to notice the foundation you're standing on, not to challenge it, but to help you notice. What I claim happens is, after grounding in that consciously, becoming a lot more connected with it, one thing that happens is a lot of things that you thought were obviously true become rapidly challenged because a part of you knows better. The part of you that's right. Then that becomes kind of challenging. It becomes particularly fucky if you follow this thread and then you realize, actually, I'm not experiencing anything. That's a spiritually weird space. But somehow I am. It's like, but that's its own thing, and that's separate from the question of gaslighting. So, yeah, I think maybe a simpler way of saying it is, well, what's gaslighting? How do you tell the difference between gaslighting and perceiving reality? And I don't mean that as an intellectual consideration. I mean, from where do you tell? That'll be the answer to the question. Use that. Okay, Daniel says, someone has once said that suffering is a kind of prediction error. Yeah, I think this is in, what is it, perceptual control theory, I think it is. That I've heard it even stronger, that all experience is a prediction error. All sensation is a prediction error. That goes into some very weird places. Some very, very weird places. Yeah, I think that's possible. I don't know if it's useful. It might be useful for some people. I notice that so I don't like that. It's like an interesting idea, but I don't like it for myself, and I'll tell you why. When I look at suffering as a kind of prediction error, this stimulates a thought, and most of the energy is in the head about, well, heck, what are predictions, and what would a prediction error be? And I start to generate this mental anticipation thing of, well, like here I am talking when I click on a button and I'm expecting the screen to interact in a particular way, and that doesn't happen. That's a surprise to my system. Is that suffering? And there's this head energy that's very weird. And I start to notice, well, there's a way of orienting to it that isn't suffering, but is all suffering a version of this? And I notice that I get disconnected from the thing that can tell me what is or is not true. Like my head spins, and it's not plugging into my balls. It's just like it's taking off. So even if that's true, whatever that means, I find that thought isn't useful to me that way. So for that reason, I don't care for it. But that's me. Maybe it does something beautiful for you, and it does ground you, and it gives you orientation. Then Daniel asks, who said that it's the mind doing the predicting? I did. I don't mean that as a universal claim. What I was describing the phenomenology of when I look at suffering as a kind of prediction error, and when I try to use that, what kind of thing happens? The way that puts me to sort of a thought bubble. Even in that thought bubble, when I start to go, well, it could be that even my body is making predictions. Like my body anticipates like reaching forward and pushing a button, but instead the computer collapses and breaks into a bunch of pieces, and now that's suffering. And yeah, but I'm still in the thought bubble, and there's, for me, this experience of disconnection. But again, that's me. Cool. Sue, I think I've said what I wanted to say. I want to add an extra line here. I think I mentioned something about this earlier here, but I want to emphasize this: that there are parts of this that I know. I'm very solid on. I'm very clear. But I am still working to embody and live this. A lot of this kind of language, the clarity of this kind of language is something that I got from my teacher, Perry Chase, like one of my teachers, Perry Chase, where she puts this huge emphasis on, is it true? I think she means the same kind of thing that Byron Katie talks about. If you've encountered her stuff, the work, when she invites you, when you have a thought, to go through the inquiry practice of answering 4 questions. Is it true? Can you absolutely know that it's true? Who am I, or what do I experience when I think this thought? And who would I be, or what would it feel like for me to be without this thought? You just sincerely think each question, let it kind of ring in your body, and you answer. And that process does some really interesting things for a lot of people. It cleans out stuff. Part of the trick is you can't do it just mentally. It's got to ring in the body. I think she hints at this. But anyway, when she's saying, is it true? This is not asking when... it's not exactly asking, does this make a claim about the world that is accurate? Like, it's a very head way of asking the question. I think she might nudge in that kind of direction, but it's not the kind of truth that matters. When you're looking at something like, oh no, if I don't, if I don't get really good Christmas presents for each of the members of my family, they're going to be really offended, and that's going to feel awful to me. Like, you could ask, is it true? Well, yes, they're going to get offended if I don't do this right. They've done this every year, and it's a big problem, and that's going to hurt, and I'm not going to like that. But there's the question, a different way to phrase the question might be something like, is there bullshit in this claim? I think that's a little closer to the essence of it. Is there bullshit in this claim? And for those who didn't watch my my videos back in August, or look at the writing that I did back in August, when I say bullshit, I mean something fairly technical. I'm talking about the in contrast to a lie, like it's usually contrast to a lie. This is in the sense of Harry S. Frankfurt's essay on bullshit. Like a liar is somebody who is relying on you caring about the truth in order to deceive you, right? So they're giving you this, they're giving you information that is meant to be false and relying on your trust in truth and your reliance on truth. The bullshitter is trying to get you to stop caring about the truth. Most advertising has this kind of thing. Look at this sexy person being happy with our product. Therefore, buy our product. And it's like it takes almost no thought to notice having a sexy person next to the product doesn't make the product what you want. It doesn't mean you get sex if you get the product. It's like it requires almost no thought to cut through. But there's a kind of a way in which we don't care and we sort of let the advertising sort of wash over us. The reason that most advertising is that way today is because they've done the statistics on it. They've done the studies, not just formal scientific studies, but like they've done a whole bunch of A/B testing and a bunch of like just tracking how the advertisements are actually working. And what they keep finding is this type of associational bullshit works. People let themselves be bullshitted by advertisements. Okay? So when asking, is it true? A different way of asking is there bullshit here? Am I rehearsing bullshit? I think that may actually be a clearer way of saying Byron Katie's first question. And the second question is something like, do I have absolute clarity that there is no bullshit in this thought? I think that's a more honest way of asking those two first questions. Is there bullshit? And then if you say no, then am I absolutely clear that there is no bullshit in this thought? I think that's a more honest way of asking that, so that you don't just go, is there bullshit? No, it is important. Am I absolutely clear that there's no bullshit in there? Well, like, and that sort of catches that. Well, there might be. Yeah, there kind of is. Right? That's what that is for. Okay. Let's see. Sophia says, Byron Katie's "Can you absolutely know it's true?" feels like gaslighting to me. Like, no matter how sure you think you are about this, it's probably wrong. That feels so painful to me. Like, leave me my truth. Stop questioning it. That hurts and contracts me. Great. Then you have clarity about it. Trust that. Absolutely not going to debate that one. Also, I've had similar reactions to her stuff. There's particularly when that second question comes up. For me, the answer to the second question is always no when I use my mind. Can I absolutely know that it's true? Well, of course not. I mean, it could turn out that I'm a potato dreaming all of this because quantum physics is weird, right? I mean, it's like, could I absolutely know it's true? No, I don't know anything. In fact, the deeper I go into spirituality, the more profoundly clear and lived it becomes for me that I know literally nothing. Like, that's weird. Do I know it's weird? No. It's really strange and it's wonderful. It's very freeing. But anyway, to ground back in the pragmatic, I resonate with this too, honestly. I think a lot of people get a lot of benefit out of it because they're not used to honestly challenging their beliefs. Honestly challenging, not just intellectually challenging, but honestly down in their guts and balls and bones or ovaries, whatever kind of anatomy is down there, just all the way down, actually being with it. That's part of why I think my resonating with that was part of what was going on for me when I was just saying, I think this is a more honest way to describe Byron Katie's stuff. Is there bullshit here? And if no, am I absolutely clear with myself that there's no bullshit here? there's an intellectual game that's very similar, which is, well, I could be bullshitting myself and then I wouldn't know, but the way bullshit works, as far as I can tell, it can't grab the guts that way. It can obfuscate the guts and cause the mind to disconnect and distrust the guts, distrust the body. But it can't make the body lie, because the body's job is to survive and be in touch with the world. Ideas can't change that. All ideas can do is cause the mind to create a fog of confusion. So this is something that I have a sense of resolving that for me. But the reason I bring up anything with Byron Katie is to highlight what the role of true is doing here. I think maybe a better description of it is real or matters. Does this matter? Does this touch the heart? Does it create a more loving and beautiful life? Not necessarily easier, not necessarily more pleasant, but more in touch with reality at a level that the mind can serve instead of having to get the mind's approval. At least that's how I orient to it. Okay. Yeah, I think we're going to call that a wrap. Thanks for watching and for engaging. We'll see whether I get to yesterday's aforementioned Hermetic creation story tomorrow. So, yeah, have a great night.